It's time for Security Now. Steve Gibson's here, and it's very topical. We're kind of going to change up what we normally do. This would normally be a Q&A show, but given the big hack that happened to Mat Honan, the writer for Wired Magazine, or Wired.com this week, Steve's going to talk about the hack, how it happened, and most importantly, what lessons we have learned. Mat Honan's very bad weekend. We'll talk about it next on Security Now.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Audio bandwidth for Security Now is provided by the new Winamp for Android, featuring wireless sync and one-click iTunes import. Now with free daily music downloads and full-length CD listening parties. Download it for free at winamp.com/Android. Video bandwidth for Security Now is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com. This is Security Now with Steve Gibson, episode 364, recorded August 8th, 2012. Mat Honan's very bad weekend. Security Now is brought to you by Go to Assist from Citrix. Take control of your IT world from one simple cloud-based platform. Provide live or unattended support to all your users anywhere. Sign up for your 30-day free trial today. Visit gotoassist.com and use the promo code SECURITY. And by audible.com. To download the free audiobook of your choice, go to audiblepodcast.com/securitynow. It's time for Security Now, the show that protects you, your loved ones, and your privacy whenever you're online or off. Here, well, we can't protect you from some things, but we do our best.
Anywhere in between.
Anywhere in between. Our explainer-in-chief, Mr. Steve Gibson, is here. The man at GRC.com, creator of Spinrite, world's finest hard drive maintenance and recovery utility, and lots of free utilities. And we've been doing this show now. This is episode 364, which means nominally, it would be a Q&A episode. Not so this time.
Well, yes, we had one set up for this week. Yet what happened was late last week on Friday, something happened to a well-known industry technology reporter, Mat Honan, involving, essentially, he described it as the end of his digital life. A complete hacking of his digital life. You had him on your main TWiT podcast on Sunday, which I watched, and then he wrote about this in greater detail the following day, Monday of this week. So, and what we have, thanks to Matt's having untangled this and him having conversations with various involved parties, including the guys who hacked him, we believe, is now an understanding of how this was done. And I can't think of anything more on point for this podcast than us taking a close look at this. And then once we understand it, we'll discuss, Leo, how it happened sort of from a meta level and what our takeaways are, what, if anything, we can do, and sort of the state of the industry's security. So we'll catch up with news stuff, and then I want to share what Matt wrote on Monday, and then take our listeners through sort of a forensic timeline that I've assembled from that, because what Matt shares is a little bit out of sequence, and it's great for drama, but it leaves us a little not quite understanding how it happens. So I put it all together, and then we'll talk about what it means.
I would also be very interested in talking about what we do in response, because it certainly made me completely rethink what I thought was a secure setup and change some things. And so I'd love to get your advice on that.
One of the things we're going to see, and this. We couldn't invent a more compelling scenario than what actually happened last Friday to this nice, well-meaning person.
Yeah,
who's who's as a consequence, all the photos he ever took of his newborn daughter are hanging in the balance.
Well, there's good news, I think, on that.
Good.
I think the forensics that Apple was able to do, the good news is that the overwrite hadn't happened yet. So I've hooked him up with friends of mine in the drive data recovery business up at Drive Savers, and I hope that he will get his pictures back. But I don't want to. But that's the end of the story. We're going to go back and go back in time to Friday in just a little bit. Also, I know you have some things to talk about, including Mars and sci-fi and more. But first, let me just quickly just stick in a little mention of one of our favorite sponsors, the folks at Citrix, who do a tool that anybody in IT is absolutely going to want to know about. You probably already know about it. It is the #1 remote support solution in the world. It's called GoToAssist. Yeah, you know that, right? We talked about it for a long time. GoToAssist.com if you want to find out more. But there's a new feature to GoToAssist. So GoToAssist for years has been #1 in remote access. That means you can use it to fix a computer on your client's system remotely. Even when they're not there, you can do 8 sessions at once. You can do it from an iPad. I mean, this is just really great stuff. Works Mac or PC, completely cross-platform. It has always been the tool for remote support. But now they've added something very interesting, and I think this makes this a complete tool if you're in IT. And if you're interested in doing managed services, even more important. This is the so you've heard about GoToAssist remote support. Now GoToAssist monitoring, a new module. And it's so cool. So here's what happens. You'll go to your client's network. Russell Tammany, our IT guy, did this on our network. He runs the crawler across our network, and it does a complete inventory of everything on the network. Network-attached devices, computers, even the software that's running or installed on those computers. So you got all the applications, all the devices. Then you set up a custom dashboard. Now they have some pre-canned stuff, a lot of the stuff people do all the time. Things like monitoring server performance, network performance, hard drive capacity, even things like toner cartridges. You set your own thresholds, and then you get notifications when there's trouble coming on the horizon via IM, SMS, email. This is so cool because this way you're proactive. You can fix a problem before it becomes a bigger problem. And you look like a support hero. You look like you're prescient. Wow. He fixed it before my hard drive was running low, and I didn't even know it. He knew it. She knew it. That's thanks to GoToAssist. And then you use the remote support to fix stuff. This is just really slick. So I'm sure you could think of about a dozen ways you could apply this in your business as an IT manager, as a managed service provider, as an IT consultant, as a software support guy. Just tons of uses for this. But here's the deal. Try it right now for free for 30 days. I want you to visit GoToAssist.com, click the blue Try It Free button. You can try both modules free for 30 days. All you have to do is use our offer code. It's the promo code right here. Security Now, one word. That's it. 30 days free. I really think you ought to try this. If you're in support of any kind, this is something that would just be such an asset. GoToAssist.com, and the promo code on this says security on the screen. Says security. Yeah, it is just security. I'm sorry, I said it wrong. I should read my own copy. Security is all you need. GoToAssist.com, promo code security. I think you're going to like this. Try it today. All right, before we get to the Honan hack, as it is becoming known as, is there any other security news?
Well, the most interesting kerfuffle is Ed Bott, and a number of other people reported this. I mentioned Ed because he was also on TWiT on Sunday.
Love Ed.
A great old timer in our industry who you and I have known forever. Mm-hmm. And that is that Microsoft has announced that indeed IE version 10, the next version of Internet Explorer, which will run on Windows 7 and presumably 8, will in fact have Do Not Track enabled by default.
Oh, so they went back and forth on this.
They have. Well, because there is such pressure against having this done coming from as Ed described it, the tracking industry. I got a kick out of that. I thought, that's the tracking industry. Mm-hmm. There is a working group at the W3C that are putting together the specs for the do not track header. And as we know, it's an optional request header, meaning that it's metadata, not part of the URL. It's additional stuff that the browser sends to the server for every request for pages and GIFs and JPEGs and images and scripts and everything. And so every request would be embellished with this little statement saying that this user wishes not to be tracked, wishes not to have this query tied into other queries, not to have cookies linked, and all the tricks that are used. And so we're aware now that many browsers, if not, I think we're at all browsers at this point, can have this optionally, but normally it's disabled. Microsoft is the first, and I'm delighted because, as we know, I coined the term years ago, the tyranny of the default, which was sort of the expression I like to use for, we know that most users don't go in and change things. They just assume that someone smarter than them chose the settings that are best for them, and so they just say yes a lot when they're asked questions. So what that means is that if it's enabled by default, it'll tend to stay on, which the tracking industry doesn't want to have happen. In fact, they're pushing the spec to state that browsers will have it disabled by default, so then they can claim that Internet Explorer is not obeying the standards and can use that as their basis for ignoring the header. So we have a little ways to go.
Yeah.
But it's clear that, we're on the right track. What Microsoft has said is that they will have their express setup for IE10 will enable it by default and make it clear that that do not track, that tracking is, that the request not to be tracked is enabled. And that'll be part of the express setup. If you use the custom setup, you'll be taken through a more of a Q&A, like, do you want this? Do you want that? Do you want, what do you want for your default search? Do you want to disable, do you want to request not to have tracking? And even there, I would imagine most people are going to say, yeah, I'd rather not be tracked. So this is a big event for the industry because Microsoft, even though most of us are no longer using IE, those of us within earshot of this podcast are probably on Chrome or Firefox with various
still a huge number of people almost going to be
the majority.
Yeah,
I mean it's still the majority platform.
Yeah.
Yes. So what they do matter, and it does pave the way for other browsers that have added the header but not yet taken the leap to enable it by default. It paves the way for them to do that. So that was this week's biggest news over on the security and privacy front. The other big news I got a kick out of, as I'm sure you did. In fact, I guess Tom was up and broadcasting as Curiosity was making its phenomenal multi-phase, can you even believe they pulled it off landing?
That's a good way to describe it. I had, and I think a lot of geeks did because I saw pictures on Instagram and stuff, many screens open. I had our live coverage. I had NASA. I had CNN just to see what CNN was doing on the television. And CNN's shameful coverage was just ridiculously stupid. NASA was great, and we had some great interviews, and we had Phil Platt, the bad astronomer. We had Bill Sell, the guy in charge of the crane. We had Dr. Kiki and, of course, Tom Merritt. So I was really proud of it. But you know what shocked me is how little attention this got.
I'm with
shocked.
you completely. The next morning, I specifically, fired up a browser to look for news, and there was like other stuff happening. I mean, it did collide with the Olympics, and that's been a major passion for people for the last week and a half. But still,
yeah, well, that happens every 4 years. This has never happened.
well, longtime listeners of this podcast will remember that I have always kept us aware of those cute little rovers, Spirit and Opportunity.
Yep.
They would, some dust storm would come up and cover their solar panels in red Martian dust, and then they would power themselves. They would wind down as their batteries discharged, and JPL, the Jet Propulsion Lab, would think, well, okay, that's probably it. They started in the beginning of 2004, and these little suckers just kept going. I mean, they were the Energizer bunnies of Mars, and then a wind would, come up a few months later, blow the red dust off of the solar panels. They would charge themselves back up and, ping JPL. And it's like, oh, they're back. And off they would go again. So who knows how long Curiosity is going to be driving around the surface. But with any luck, we'll have many years of keeping tabs on it. So as I see things, I would love our people who are in Twitter to make sure that I know what's going on, and I'll pass that news on to our listeners, because it was awful. It was
so
fun
exciting
to watch those two cute little guys, who just kept on going year after year after year.
Well, and now those were little guys. This is a science lab. I mean, this is a significant.
This is an SUV. We dropped an SUV on Mars.
Yeah, I mean, it's got mass spectrometers. It's got 3D stereoscopic camera. I mean, this thing. And I mean, just the pictures we're already getting back are amazing, and I just can't wait to see what we discover. And it is a return in some ways, I think, to space flight. This is people. The debate, of course, goes on and on about manned versus unmanned missions, and you can do so much with unmanned missions, and it's so much safer and less expensive. But I do think the reason there was less attention is because there was no human aboard. Had there been a human, of course, the world would have been mesmerized.
Yeah.
And that's why you put humans on these things. I don't know if it's a good enough reason, but that is why you do it.
Yeah, it's funny. I've watched our general sort of lack of interest, and people have wondered why isn't this generating the same sort of attention that our original space exploration was?
Right.
And one of the things that has occurred to me is that, well, we don't have photon torpedoes. We don't have, these are boring compared to the stuff that we now,
For Christ's sake, we hung a crane in the air and lowered the thing. It was about the coolest thing I've ever seen.
I agree. I mean, this really did happen.
This was almost photon torpedo quality, I'm telling you. Yeah. But anyway, I do think that what I did see was that there was a bifurcation, that normal people didn't even know about it, but everybody who watches TWiT, I was in there with the community. There were 1,000 people in the chat room. We had more people watching that space coverage late at night than watched TWiT earlier in the evening. I'm convinced that the geeks, the internet, the people who are into this stuff were very much aware of it.
Well,
and that's why we're going to do more of that kind of stuff here on TWiT. I think this is our job.
If Gene Roddenberry had written this landing sequence, and it was in one of the Star Trek episodes, we would have thought, oh, come on. Yeah. You can't ever do that.
I thought, oh, come on. There's no way.
No, and this was real.
And they couldn't test it. It was too bizarre to even test. They just had to do it. And they did it. And brilliant.
Well, speaking of cars driving around Mars, we have cars driving around Nevada. Nevada granted Google a license for its driverless cars to drive on public streets. And the news came out that Google has passed 300,000 accident-free miles. And I saw something that I just didn't have time to drill down, but maybe you know more about this, where they said they were going to start allowing the cars to drive their employees to work.
I didn't see that, but that's great.
Before long. So,
well, it's legal in California. or at least they've been doing it in California for some time. And I know that
on public streets.
Oh yeah.
Whoa.
Oh yeah, for years. Now I don't know if it is legal. I think that what they do is the guy's hovering his hands over the wheel or something.
Yes.
I don't know how they're getting away with it.
Very, very nervous co-pilots.
The state of California, along with the state of Nevada and several other states in the union, are passing these laws that will make this legal. I think this is very exciting. Notice, by the way, they said 300,000 accident-free miles, but they said 300,000 miles free of accidents while under autonomous control. The cars did have some fender benders while the guy was driving. It was the autonomous control that was safe. It's very
Hal
funny.
just says, Dave,
Please,
let go of the
let me-
wheel.
let
I've
me,
got
Dave.
this.
I'm sorry, Dave. Take your hands off the wheel, Dave.
So on my stair climber, I am reading Kill Decision, which is Daniel Suarez's third book.
Awesome.
And I just wanted to recommend it.
yeah.
I am I'm
good.
reading it slowly because I only allow myself to read it when I'm, huffing and puffing. But
He
it
is
is
so good, isn't he?
really developing nicely.
Yeah.
So
And tech topics, absolutely. I mean, he's so good on tech.
yes.
And the topics that he covers are, he's going to be on Triangulation this afternoon at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 2200 UTC, Daniel Suarez. And I have so many questions for him. Is Raconteur real? Is there anything like that's out there? It's just fascinating.
Yeah, he gets this stuff. Well,
Oh, yeah.
it's all he gets the tech right so that it's satisfying.
Yeah.
But it's very well put together.
It's challenging. There's some very challenging stuff in here. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's great. Now, I heard you talking, I guess it must have been on Sunday when I had tuned in to listen to Matt and you talk about Total Recall, which I saw with Jen on Monday.
Oh, good.
And
What'd you think? Because, I love it's a Philip K. Dick book, which, of course, is brilliant.
Yep. And I love the original Schwarzenegger.
Get yourself
movie.
to Mars. Why am I
Spectacular.
standing here with a towel on my head? Yeah, great stuff.
There is a sense, and maybe it's me being as old as I am, where I'm feeling a little impatient with movies that just have action for its own sake.
No, I'm the same way, and maybe it is.
It's like, okay, come on, let's get on with the plot.
Yeah.
It's like
another car chase. Really?
Yeah, it's like those Transformer movies. It's just like, okay, we know we've got CG figured out.
Right.
I can't tell the difference between what's real and not anymore.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. But let's just not fill 45 minutes of the movie with gratuitous, nonstop action. I just no longer that interesting. So, I'm very excited about the new Bourne movie that comes out the end of this week. And I'm glad I saw Total Recall, but it's like, okay.
I rewatched the old Arnold version, just getting ready for this.
Yeah.
And it is a little dated, but it's such a fun movie.
Yeah, it's well done.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, kind of cheesy. Kind of cheesy. I mean, it just doesn't. The '80s. They didn't have the computer effects and all that stuff. It all had to be real and rubber.
Was that had Johnny Cab in it, didn't it?
You're in a Johnny Cab.
You're in a Johnny Cab. That's right.
Was there no Johnny Cab in the new one?
Oh no, we didn't have that.
You're in a Johnny Cab.
I mean, the visually, this thing was spectacular, and I said to Jen, and as I remembered feeling when I was watching Avatar, I'm wide-eyed, and I'm looking at these scapes, and I'm thinking, how do you make this movie? I mean, this is just this isn't real, yet it looks perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, just like huge
It is amazing, isn't
city
it?
stuff
Yeah.
that doesn't exist, and there it all is, fully imaged. Anyway, we're at a point now where we're just in sensory overload. It's just incredible.
So you recommend seeing it, but don't expect a miracle.
Yeah, I think that the Amazing Spider-Man is still my favorite.
The best, yeah.
And I saw, of course, the new Batman, or the final of the third, and it was good.
I liked it. I liked it better than I thought I would, to be honest.
Good. I'm glad you saw it.
Yeah. It was better than I thought it would be. But I haven't seen.
It's doing well in the box office.
Yeah. Interesting.
I wanted to share a brief, actually almost only a couple sentences, from a Mike Krusel, who was kind enough. Actually, this was a posting in our news group. I noticed that it's from grc.spinrite, which is the Spinrite news group at news.grc.com. And he said, I have 2 Dell Dimension 4600C computers, and the main computer I use crashed over the weekend, giving the message, primary hard disk 0 not found. That's never good. He says, I ran Spinrite 6, and in about 5 hours, it repaired the drive and Windows booted back up. I did run Windows XP check disk in recovery mode once before and then once after Spinrite. Thanks for its work, Mike.
Good.
So, yeah.
Usually, if you can't see drive 0, I mean, you can't see it. You can't fix it, right? I mean, I guess it was Windows that couldn't see it.
It was Windows that couldn't see it, but the BIOS, it was still physically there. So that was good enough.
Yeah. Hey, before we get to Mat Honan's hack, how it happened, the timeline, I'm dying to this. I've been tweeting about this all week, saying we'll talk about it with Steve. We'll talk about it with Steve, and there's just so much interest. So hang in there. We're going to do that. But I do want to mention Audible.com, and since you mentioned Kill Decision, tell folks it is available on Audible.com. That's how I'm reading it. It's Jeff Gertner, the same guy who did Demon, the first 2 books, Demon and Freedom TM, and he's good. He's got the right voice for it. It's like an old friend is back. I have to say, I love it when they use the same reader for a series. And Kill Decision is not in a series.
I was going to say, we ought to mention this is not the third in the sequel. Yes.
No, but you know, it's Suarez. He's got a style. He's got a voice.
It's good.
It is so good. I'm just loving it, and I highly recommend listening to Us This Way. And here's the deal: you do it for free. So if you are not yet an Audible member, I want you to go to audible.com/securitynow, and you can get a free 1-month trial membership that'll include credit towards a book. And this would be a very good. I'll just play you a little bit. Oh, I can't. I don't have audio coming out of this computer, but you really will enjoy it. That's one of the things I like about Audible. First of all, 100,000 books, the best readers, really the best readers. Because a lot of these guys are like, oh, look at this. I didn't see this. Here's the review. Leo was right. I love it. I just saw this. So, hey, what do you need? The guy says, Mark in Las Vegas says, Leo was right. He says, this is a great book. It is. I was nervous about reading it because I loved Demon and Freedom TM so much. I thought, can he live up to it? He did. Blows me away. This guy is the real deal. 3 in a row. He's like a hat trick. So what is Audible? Audible is 100,000 books, audio books you could play on your iPhone, your Android phone, even your Windows phone. They've got a great app for Android, Windows, and iPhone that has your whole library in it, which means you can go back in time and listen to every book, any book that you've had. Now, I've been an Audible member since 2000. This is how much I love Audible. And that means I have over 500 books in my library, and they're all at my disposal, all available anytime I want to look at them. Here's the app on my Nexus 7. This is my library of stuff going back in time. There's a lot of – this is great, you know. I mean, wonderful books, great content. You will never be at a loss. Anytime you've got a few minutes to spare, you're reading. And to me, that's what I like. I'm reading again. I love to read, but who has time in this day and age to read? Well, now you do with Audible.com. It is fantastic. And so here's your chance to try it absolutely free. audiblepodcast.com/securitynow. And you can join Audible, and you're going to love it. I'm telling you. First book is free. And a great one, a great choice. We love it. Kill Decision from Daniel Suarez. Look, if you download it, the nice thing about Audible, you get it right away. If you download it right now, within 10 minutes you'll be listening to this book. If you start listening right now, you'll be ready for our interview with Daniel in 4 hours. Well, it's a 13-hour book, but you'll be...
finish listening to us first.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Audible, you can, that's the beauty of this. You can listen whenever you want. audiblepodcast.com/securitynow. Yes?
I was going to say, and for those people who are getting this podcast this evening or tomorrow, I'm sure that you'll have your interview with Daniel on Triangulation available on your site.
Oh, yes, and you should listen because he's a great guy. I met him at Foo Camp, and he was so nice. He said, he came up and he was kind of shy, and he said, I just have always wanted to meet you. And I said, are you kidding? I said, what? I've always wanted to meet you. So we're a mutual fan club.
Neat.
Nicest guy. And anyway, just really can't wait to talk to him.
He sure knows how to put a book together.
Boy, is he good. Anyway,
so
now let's tell this story. Oh, boy.
Yes. So Mat Honan is a well-known technology writer. And this is a little dramatic, but this is the best way to introduce our listeners into what you and I now understand happened. And then we'll go back and build a timeline forensically, because Matt puts this out in a little bit of a jumbled sequence.
And I have to say first, let me say right up front, I've known Matt for years. Really like the guy. He's really the real deal. Very smart. And yes, he made mistakes, as we all have, I think, in time. But I'm grateful. I talked to him last night. He said, this is a hard story for me to cover because it just kills me that this happened. But at the same time, and I told him this, he said, I think I'm making a difference. I said, Matt.
Oh, he's done a service.
Huge service.
There's no doubt about it. So on Monday, the story he wrote in Wired in his Gadget Lab column, it was titled How Apple and Amazon Security Flaws Led to My Epic Hacking. And as you said, Leo, this, as we'll shortly see, he's really not laying it all off on them. And our listeners will soon see that, this can happen to anybody. He says, in the space of 1 hour, my entire digital life was destroyed. First, my Google account was taken over, then deleted. Next, my Twitter account was compromised and used as a platform to broadcast racist and homophobic messages. And worst of all, my Apple ID account was broken into, and my hackers used it to remotely erase all the data on my iPhone, iPad, and MacBook. In many ways, this was all my fault. My accounts were daisy-chained together. Getting into Amazon let my hackers get into my Apple ID account, which helped them get into Gmail, which gave them access to Twitter. Had I used two-factor authentication for my Google account, it's possible that none of this would have happened, because their ultimate goal was always to take over my Twitter account and wreak havoc. Lulz. Had I been regularly backing up the data on my MacBook, I wouldn't have had to worry about losing more than a year's worth of photos covering the entire lifespan of my daughter, or documents and emails that I had stored in no other location. Those security lapses are my fault, and I deeply, deeply regret them. But what happened to me exposes vital security flaws in several customer service systems, most notably Apple's and Amazon's. Apple Tech Support gave the hackers access to my iCloud account. Amazon Tech Support gave them the ability to see a piece of information, a partial credit card number, that Apple used to release information. In short, the very 4 digits that Amazon considers unimportant enough to display in the clear on the web are precisely the same ones that Apple considers secure enough to perform identity verification. The disconnect exposes flaws in data management policies endemic to the entire technology industry and points to a looming nightmare as we enter the era of cloud computing and connected devices. This isn't just my problem. Since Friday, August 3rd, when hackers broke into my accounts, I've heard from other users who were compromised in the same way, at least one of whom was targeted by the same group. Moreover, if your computers aren't already cloud-connected devices, they will be soon. Apple is working hard to get all of its customers to use iCloud. Google's entire operating system is cloud-based. And Windows 8, the most cloud-centric operating system yet, will hit desktops by the tens of millions in the coming year. My experience leads me to believe that cloud-based systems need fundamentally different security measures. Password-based security mechanisms, which can be cracked, reset, and socially engineered, no longer suffice in the era of cloud computing. I realized something was wrong about 5 p.m. Friday afternoon. I was playing with my daughter when my iPhone suddenly powered down. I was expecting a call, so I went to plug it back in. It then rebooted to the setup screen. This was irritating, but I wasn't concerned. I assumed it was a software glitch, and my phone automatically backs up every night. I just assumed it would be a pain in the ass and nothing more. I entered my iCloud login to restore, and it wasn't accepted. Again, I was irritated, but not alarmed. I went to connect the iPhone to my computer and restore from that backup, which I just had happened to do the other day. When I opened my laptop, an iCal message popped up telling me that my Gmail account information was wrong. Then the screen went gray and asked for a 4-digit PIN. I didn't have a 4-digit PIN on my laptop. By now, I knew something was very, very wrong. For the first time, it occurred to me that I was being hacked. Unsure of exactly what was happening, I unplugged my router and cable modem, turned off the Mac Mini we use as an entertainment center, grabbed my wife's phone, and called Apple Care, the company's tech support service, and spoke with a rep for the next hour and a half. It wasn't the first call they had had that day about my account. In fact, I later found out that a call had been placed just a little more than a half hour before my own. But the Apple rep didn't bother to tell me about the first call concerning my account, despite the 90 minutes I spent on the phone with him. Nor would Apple tech support ever tell me about the first call voluntarily. It only shared this information after I asked about it. And I only knew about the first call because a hacker told me he had made the call himself. At 4:33 p.m., according to Apple's tech support records, someone called Apple Care claiming to be me. Apple says the caller reported that he couldn't get into his me.com email, which of course was my me.com email. In response, Apple issued a temporary password. It did this despite the caller's inability to answer security questions I had set up. And it did this after the hacker supplied only 2 pieces of information that anyone with an internet connection and a phone can discover. At 4:50 p.m., a password reset confirmation arrived in my inbox. I don't really use my @e.com email and rarely check it. But even if I did, I might not have noticed the message because the hackers immediately sent it to the trash. They then were able to follow the link in that email to permanently reset my own Apple ID password. At 4:52 p.m., a Gmail password recovery email arrived in my me.com mailbox. 2 minutes later, another email arrived notifying me that my Google account password had changed. At 5:02 p.m., they reset my Twitter password. At 5, they used iCloud's Find My tool to remotely wipe my iPhone. At 5:01, they remotely wiped my iPad. At 5:05, they remotely wiped my MacBook.
Oh, jeez.
Around this time, they deleted my Google account. At 5:10, I placed the call to Apple Care. At 5:12, the attackers posted a message to my account on Twitter taking credit for the hack. By wiping my MacBook and deleting my Google account, they now not only had the ability to control my account, but were able to prevent me from regaining access. And crazily, in ways that I don't and never will understand, those deletions were just collateral damage. My MacBook data, including those irreplaceable pictures of my family, of my child's first year, and relatives who have now passed from this life, weren't the target, nor were the 8 years of messages in my Gmail account. The target was always Twitter. My MacBook data was torched simply to prevent me from getting back in. Lulz, he writes. I spent an hour and a half talking to Apple Care. One of the reasons it took me so long to get anything resolved with Apple during my initial phone call was because I couldn't answer the security questions it had on file for me. It turned out there's a good reason for that. Perhaps an hour or so into the call, the Apple representative on the line said, Mr. Herman, Wait, what did you call me? Mr. Herman? My name is Honan. Apple had been looking at the wrong account all along. Perhaps because of that, I couldn't answer my security questions. And because of that, it asked me an alternate set of questions that it said would let tech support let me into my me.com account, a billing address, and the last 4 digits of my credit card. Of course, when I gave them those, it was no use because tech support had misheard my last name. It turns out a billing address and the last 4 digits of a credit card number are the only 2 pieces of information anyone needs to get into your iCloud account. Once supplied, Apple will issue a temporary password, and that password grants access to iCloud. Apple tech support confirmed to me twice over the weekend that all you need to access someone's Apple ID is the associated email address, a credit card number, the billing address, and the last 4 digits of a credit card on file. I was very clear about this. During my second tech support call to Apple Care, the representative confirmed this. Quote, that's all you have to verify something with us, unquote, he said. We talked to Apple directly about its security policy, and company spokesperson Natalie Karras told Wired, quote, Apple takes customer privacy seriously and requires multiple forms of verification before resetting an Apple ID password. In this particular case, the customer's data was compromised by a person who had acquired personal information about the customer. In addition, we found that our own internal policies were not followed completely. I'll just interject here that turns out not to be true. Continuing, she said, quoting, we are reviewing all of our processes for resetting account passwords to ensure our customers' data is protected. On Monday, so that's 3 days later, Monday at the beginning of this week, Wired tried to verify the hacker's access technique by performing it on a different account. We were successful. This means, ultimately, all you need in addition to someone's email address are those two easily acquired pieces of information, a billing address and the last 4 digits of a credit card on file. Here's the story of how the hackers got them. On the night of the hack, I tried to make use of the ruin that was my digital life. My Google account was nuked. My Twitter account was suspended. My phone was in a useless state of restore, and, for obvious reasons, I was highly paranoid about using my @me.com account for communications. I decided to set up a new Twitter account until my old one could be restored, just to let people know what was happening. I logged into Tumblr and posted an account of how I thought the takedown had occurred. At this point, I was assuming that my 7-digit alphanumeric Apple ID password had been hacked by brute force. In the comments, he says, friends, and oh, the comments, others guessed that hackers had used some sort of keystroke logger. At the end of the post, I linked to my new Twitter account. And then one of my hackers @messaged me. He would later identify himself as Phobia. I followed him. He followed me back. We started a dialogue via Twitter direct messaging and later continued via email and AIM. Phobia was able to reveal enough detail about the hack and my compromised accounts that it became clear he was, at the very least, a party to how it went down. I agreed not to press charges, and in return, he laid out exactly how the hack worked. But first, he wanted to clear something up. Quote, "Didn't guess your password or use brute force. I have my own guide on how to secure emails," unquote. I asked him why. Was I targeted specifically? Was this just to get to Gizmodo's Twitter account that had been linked to mine? No, Phobia said. They hadn't even been aware that my account was linked to Gizmodo's, that the Gizmodo linkage was just gravy. He said the hack was simply a grab for my 3-character Twitter handle. That's all they wanted. They just wanted to take it and mess it up and watch it burn. It wasn't personal. I honestly didn't have any heat towards you before this. I'm quoting. I just liked your username, like I said before, he told me via Twitter direct message. After coming across my account, which, by the way, is cool. It's MAT, so @Matt. Very nice Twitter account, which he clearly, as you mentioned on Sunday, Leo, got very
deeply
early.
Regrets. And got it early.
It says, after coming across my account, the hackers did some background research. My Twitter account linked to my personal website, where they found my Gmail address. Guessing that this was also the email address I used for Twitter, Phobia went to Google's account recovery page. He didn't even have to actually attempt a recovery. This was just a recon. Because I didn't have Google's 2-factor authentication turned on, when Phobia entered my Gmail address, he could view the alternate email I had set up for account recovery. Google partially obscures that information, starring out many characters. But there were enough characters available, M******N @me.com. Jackpot. This was how the hack progressed. If I had some other account aside from an Apple email address or had used 2-factor authentication for Gmail, everything would have been stopped there. But using the me.com email account as a backup meant I told the hacker I had an Apple ID account, which meant I was vulnerable to being hacked. Quote, you honestly can get into any email associated with Apple, unquote, Phobia claimed in an email. And while it's work, that seems to be largely true. Since he already had the email, all he needed was my billing address and the last 4 digits of my credit card number to have Apple's Care tech support issue him the keys to my account. So how did he get this vital information? He began with the easy one. He got the billing address by doing a Whois search on my personal web domain. If someone doesn't have a domain, you can also look up his or her information on Spokeo, White Pages, and PeopleSmart. Getting a credit card number is trickier, but it also relies on taking advantage of a company's back-end systems. Phobia says that a partner, that is a partner of his, performed this part of the hack, but described the technique to us, which we were able to verify via our own tech support calls. It's remarkably easy. So easy that Wired was able to duplicate the exploits twice in minutes. First, you call Amazon and tell them you are the account holder and want to add a credit card number to the existing account. All you need is the name on the account, an associated email address, and the billing address. Amazon then allows you to input a new credit card. And he says, parens, Wired used a bogus credit card number from a website that generates fake card numbers that conform with the industry's published self-check algorithm. Then you hang up. Next, you call back and tell Amazon that you've lost access to your account. Upon providing a name, billing address, and the new card number you gave the company on the prior call, Amazon now allows you to add a new email address to the account. From there, you go to the Amazon website and send a password reset to the new email account. This allows you to see all the credit cards on file for the account. Not the complete numbers, just the last 4 digits. But, as we know, Apple only needs those last 4 digits. We asked Amazon to comment on its security policy, but didn't have anything to share at press time. And it's also worth noting that one wouldn't have to call Amazon to pull this off. Your pizza delivery guy could do the same thing, for example. If you have an Apple ID, every time you call Pizza Hut, you're giving the 16-year-old on the other end of the line all he needs to take over your entire digital life. And so, with my name, address, and the last 4 digits of my credit card number in hand, Phobia called Apple Care, and my digital life was laid to waste. Yet still, I was actually quite fortunate. They could have used my email accounts to gain access to my online banking or financial services. They could have used them to contact other people and socially engineer them as well, which actually is a point that Ed Bott brought up on your TWiT show the day before that Matt wrote this. Oh, and he says, as Ed Bott pointed out on twit.tv.
Oh.
My years as a technology journalist have put some very influential people in my address book. They could have been victimized too. Instead, the hackers just wanted to embarrass me, have some fun at my expense, and enrage my followers on Twitter by trolling. I've done some pretty stupid things you shouldn't do. I should have been regularly backing up my MacBook. Because I wasn't doing that, If all the photos from the first year and a half of my daughter's life are ultimately lost, I will have only myself to blame. I shouldn't have daisy-chained two such vital accounts, my Google and my iCloud account together. I shouldn't have used the same email prefix across, that is his name portion, M. Honan, M-H-O-N-A-N, at gmail.com, M. Honan at me.com, and M. Honan at wired.com. And I should have had a recovery address that's only used for recovery without being tied to core services. But mostly, I shouldn't have used my Find My Mac. My Find My iPhone has been a brilliant Apple service. If you lose your iPhone or have it stolen, the service lets you see where it is on a map. New York Times' David Pogue famously recovered his lost iPhone just last week, thanks to the service. And so, when Apple introduced Find My Mac in its update to its Lion operating system last year, I added that to my iCloud options too. After all, as a reporter, often on the go, my laptop is my most important tool. But as a friend pointed out to me, while the service makes sense for phones, which are quite likely to be lost, it makes less sense for computers. You're almost certainly more likely to have your computer accessed remotely than physically. And even worse is the way Find My Mac is implemented. When you perform a remote hard drive wipe on Find My Mac, the system asks you to create a 4-digit PIN so that the process can be reversed. But here's the thing. If someone else performs that wipe, someone who gained access to your iCloud account through malicious means, there's no way for you to enter that PIN. A better way to have this set up would be to require a second method of authentication when Find My Mac is initially set up. If this were the case, someone who was able to get into an iCloud account wouldn't be able to remotely wipe devices with malicious intent. It would also mean that you could potentially have a way to stop a remote wipe in progress. But that's not how it works. And Apple would not comment as to whether stronger authentication is being considered. As of Monday, when he was writing this, both of these exploits used by, and this I'm still reading from what he wrote, Matt writes, as of Monday, both of these exploits used by the hackers were still functioning. Wired was able to duplicate them. Apple says its internal tech support processes weren't followed, and this is how my account was compromised. However, this contradicts what Apple Care told me twice that weekend. That is, if that is in fact the case, that I was the victim of Apple not following its own internal processes, then the problem is widespread. I asked Phobia why he did this to me. His answer was not satisfying. He says he likes to publicize security exploits so companies will fix them. He says it's the same reason he told me how it was done. He claims his partner in the attack was the person who wiped my MacBook. Phobia expressed remorse for this and says he would have stopped it had he known. Quote, "Yeah, I really am a nice guy, IDK, so I don't know why I do some of the things I do," unquote. He told me via AIM. IDK, my goal is to get it out there to other people, so eventually everyone can overcome hackers, unquote. I asked specifically about the photos of my little girl, which are to me the greatest tragedy in all this. Unless I can recover those photos via data recovery services, they are gone forever. On AIM, I asked him if he was sorry for doing that. Phobia replied, quote, "Even though I wasn't the one that did it, I feel sorry about that. That's a lot of memories. I'm only 19, but if my parents lost and the footage of me and pics, I would be beyond sad, and I'm sure they would be too, unquote. But let's say he did know and failed to stop it. Hell, for the sake of argument, let's say he did it. Let's say he pulled the trigger. The weird thing is, I'm not even especially angry at Phobia or his partner in the attack. I'm mostly mad at myself. I'm mad as hell for not backing up my data. I'm sad and shocked and feel that I'm ultimately to blame for that loss. But I'm also upset that this ecosystem that I've placed so much of my trust in has let me down so thoroughly. I'm angry that Amazon makes it so remarkably easy to allow someone into your account, which has obvious financial consequences. And then there's Apple. I bought into the Apple account system originally to buy songs at 99 cents a pop. And over the years, that same ID has evolved into a single point of entry that controls my phones, tablets, computers, and data-driven life. With this Apple ID, someone can make thousands of dollars of purchases in an instant or do damage at a cost that you can't put a price on.
Well, and I'll give you a couple of PSs.
Yes.
First of all, the good news is, I don't know why Apple didn't ask Phobia for the PIN. Maybe he did and it wasn't given to him. But Apple was able to apparently brute force it because it's only 4 digits. And they said that the data will be on that hard drive. So I've hooked Matt up with the folks at Drive Savers, and I think they'll be able to get his data back.
Good.
So dodged a bullet on that one. The other good news, and I'm sure you're going to say this, but we should say it right up front, is about Apple and Amazon have, in response to this, changed their systems.
Yes.
Amazon permanently. Apple, it's not clear.
Yes, exactly. So, okay, I'm going to briefly recount in sequence, adding a little more detail than Matt did. So this began sometime mid to early afternoon on Friday, August 3rd, when one or more hackers just took a shine to an unknown person's Twitter account because they say it was 3 characters. It was @Matt. They didn't know anything about him, didn't know who he was, just thought, hey, that's cool. And I don't know how many followers he had. I checked yesterday, and it was, not hundreds of thousands. So maybe they got lost in the account transfer or freeze or something. I mean, it didn't look like there was a huge, it's nothing like what you have following you, Leo. So I don't know. Or maybe it's because it's linked to Gizmodo.
It's so complicated. He may not have been able to bring his followers with him. It's not. Right. And by the way, these guys, and I have corresponded a little bit with Phobia on Twitter and his partner in crime. And they got something going on because his partner in crime has a Twitter account that has 122 tweets and over 100,000 followers. So, and there's something going on.
Wow.
My suspicion would be they have more access to Twitter than they have acknowledged. Mm-hmm. There's something. Or maybe they've created 100,000 bots. I don't know. Well,
so apparently, not knowing anything about Matt, but just liking @MAT, they do some recon. They see that from the information on his Twitter account @Matt, which is where this whole thing starts, that account links to Honan, HONAN.net, which is Matt's personal website. They go there and they find his Google Mail account, mhonan@gmail.com. They access Gmail's account recovery, putting that in as their email address. And because there's no additional protection, and this is what we're going to talk about here in a second, Leo, the lack of two-factor authentication means that account recovery information is unprotected and that account's alternate email address it's visible but obscured. But so what they see is M******N at me.com.
I don't really have to guess what those are.
No, because I mean they've already saw MHONAN
right.
at gmail.com. So they realize, okay, he's used, and that's what Matt refers to in the article as using the same first name across his accounts. So that, of course, allows them to guess Matt's Apple ID and cloud address. The hacker also does a whois search on Matt's personal web domain to get more information. Now, I've done that, and you could do that, Leo. I'm not going to share what it shows because it's horrifying. I mean,
yeah, this is an argument for whois privacy.
Yes, and I'm annoyed that at least for if you're a network solutions customer, as I am, they want to charge you to obscure this.
I should point out that Hover does not.
Okay.
So if you do a whois on our TWiT.tv or any of our sites, you'll get the administrative contact and technical contact addresses will be a company called Contact Privacy in Toronto, Canada.
And that does not cost you anything?
Nope.
Good.
That's one of the reasons I like Hover.
So what's here in this whois, I mean, is right now. I mean, I did it an hour ago.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, Matt, fix this. Because, I mean, here is way too much information exposed publicly still. So, Wednesday morning. Okay, so now they've got his street address. They've got his, I don't know if this is a landline or a cell phone, but that's there too. Zip code, the works. And a bunch of email addresses. So now someone calls Amazon wanting to add an additional credit card to Matt's account.
Now this is kind of I think key because
yes,
this is social engineering.
Yes,
not a technical hack. This is not a MySQL attack.
How many times are we arguing about how many bits the crypto key has to have?
Right.
And no bits came into play here.
I don't consider doing a whois anything particularly technical. That's really all they were doing. This is social engineering, 100%.
Yep. Well, and also, frankly, I am really glad that this whole story came to light, and that Matt. I'm so sorry for his loss of data and the embarrassment and everything. But the way Amazon was set up, and as you said, they are no longer, and that's like, thank goodness. But someone was very clever to put this together. Here's the Amazon portion. So you call Amazon on the phone, and you say you want to add an additional credit card. What do you need? The name, which of course they have, Mat Honan, the email address associated with the account. Now, they guessed that he would be using Gmail. He was, so mhonan at gmail.com. There were two ways to get that, Twitter to website to Gmail, or whois, because Matt's whois had that too. And as we know, email addresses are not hard to find. And the billing address, which they got right there from whois. So that allowed them to invent a credit card and stick it on the account. Then they hang up and they call back. They're going to get somebody else. Now they say they've lost access. What do you need to gain access? The name, which we already know they have, the billing address, which they have, and the last four digits of any one credit card registered on the account. So they gave the four digits of the one they just added a second before, and that allowed them to add a new email address to the account. So now they've added an email address they control, which they don't yet have. Then they go to the website and say, we can't log in, send us a password reset. So, and we're going to see this a bunch, and this is one of the issues that this whole thing brings up, is the use of email for password recovery, which is the weak link in much of this. So they get an email address they control into the account, ask for a password reset. that sends them a link allowing them then to log in to Matt's Amazon account where they can see everything he's ever purchased and all of his actual credit cards. Well, they see the one that they just spoofed and added, and they see his real one. Now they have the last 4 digits of Matt's main card, and they've already got his name, email addresses, and billing address, which is the same as his home address. So at 4:33 p.m., with all this information, the hacker calls AppleCare, impersonates Matt, claiming that he'd forgotten the password to his mhonan@me.com account, which they now know.
These guys, I'd say one thing, they're ballsy.
They are.
They get a lot of nerve.
Yes.
And I think that to do this, you have to be good at acting.
Yes.
I think.
And yes, I completely agree. You've got to sound convincing. Although, frankly, I've had some calls from my credit card company where, I wish the other guy was an actor.
Yeah.
I can barely understand what he's saying.
So maybe not. Maybe, Apple can't make a judgment about its users. And this is the whole point, is Apple is trying to make it easy for users.
Yes. Unfortunately, these systems fail open rather than failing closed.
Right.
So he says, I've forgotten the password, mhonan@me.com. I need a temporary password so I can access my account. Despite the fact that the hacker fails all the security questions, doesn't know any of Matt's security questions, the backup that Apple provides or provided, maybe that's over, we're not sure yet, is, well, if you can't remember your security questions, how about your billing address and the last 4 digits of your credit card that they have on file, which of course they now have thanks to the game they played over at Amazon.
It's probably other ways to get it too. It's fairly easy to do this, right? I mean, that's not much to ask.
This was also the point that he makes about, the Pizza Hut guy.
He knows that.
When you phone for pizza, you give them your address because you'd like it delivered, and you give them your credit card number over the phone.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got that.
Mm-hmm.
And how many places now are we seeing people asking for your email address? Because, we'd just like to, inform you of any updates.
Stay in touch, yeah.
So, yeah, exactly. So that allows that. So Apple issues a temporary password, which allows the hacker to log into iCloud and Matt's mhonan@email.com email account. And this is one point that's important. This is in keeping with Apple's official care policies at the time. This was not a mistake. And that's a point that Matt made, and I've read similar things coming at this from different directions about this earlier this week. So it is not the case that one spokesperson misspoke. Okay, that was at 4:33. At 4:50, Apple sends the password reset link to Matt's mhonan@me account. The hackers log in with a temporary password. They receive and delete the password reset email, not that it really matters, and they reset Matt's password, locking Matt out of his own Apple ID and iCloud account. 2 minutes later, 4:52, Google Mail password recovery email arrives at Matt's mhonan@me.com account. So what they did was they went back over to Google, where they had visited before, where they saw that he had an @me.com account. They do password recovery at Google, which sends the recovery link to the me.com account. So they click that. That gives them access to Matt's Gmail account. They change his Gmail password, locking him out of his Gmail account. At 2 minutes later, 4:54, mail arrives at me.com informing Matt, who can no longer log into there either, that his Google Mail password has been changed. So the notice goes out that the password change has been effective, but Matt can't see that because he's already been locked out of his accounts. A few minutes later, with access, at 5 p.m., with access to Matt's Apple ID and iCloud account, hackers remotely wipe Matt's iPhone. A minute later, at 5:01, they remotely wipe Matt's iPad. A minute later, at 5:02, the Twitter account password is reset. So a reset comes, the password is changed, so they now have taken over his Twitter account. Matt's locked out of his very cool @Matt account, and hackers have achieved their intended goal. A couple minutes later, having verified that, at 5:05, to prevent Matt from having any tools to regain control, they remotely wipe Matt's not backed up MacBook, containing, as we know, his only copies of his newborn daughter's photo collection and pics of older relatives who've passed away. At 5:10, 5 minutes after that, Matt notices his iPhone has been cleared and places his first 90-minute call to Apple Care. 2 minutes later, hackers, having control of @Matt Twitter account, post a message to Matt's account taking credit for their actions. So Wired successfully repeated many of these alleged hacks, verifying them through the weekend and into the beginning of the week. Apple has reacted, as reported by Wired. Wired said, Apple on Tuesday, so that's the day before we're recording this. This would be Tuesday the 7th. Apple on Tuesday ordered its support staff to immediately stop processing Apple ID password changes requested over the phone. An Apple worker with knowledge of the situation, speaking on condition of anonymity, told Wired that the over-the-phone password freeze on obeying these change requests would last at least 24 hours. The employee speculated that the freeze was put in place to give Apple more time to determine what security policies needed to be changed, if any. When Wired tried to exploit again, quote, the representative said that the company was going through system-wide maintenance updates that prevented anyone from resetting any passwords over the phone. The rep said we should try calling back after about 24 hours and directed us to iforgot.apple.com to change Apple ID passwords ourselves using the web instead. Quote, right now, our system does not allow us to reset passwords, the Apple rep told Wired. I don't know why. In an earlier attempt on Tuesday to change an Apple ID password, which is the same password used to log into iTunes and iCloud, Apple customer service offered up a different response, saying that passwords could only be changed over the phone if we were able to supply a serial number for a device linked to the Apple ID in question. For example, an iPhone, iPad, or MacBook computer. The rep also suggested changing our Apple ID password online at appleid.apple.com or iforgot.apple.com. On the Amazon side, also via Wired, Amazon changed its customer privacy policies on Monday, closing security gaps that were exploited in the identity hacking of Wired reporter Mat Honan on Friday. Previously, Apple allowed people to call in and change the email address associated with an Amazon account or add a credit card number to an Amazon account as long as the caller could identify him or herself by name, email address, and mailing address, 3 bits of personal information that are easily found online. On Tuesday, Amazon handed down to its customer service department a policy change that no longer allows people to call in and change account settings, such as credit cards or email addresses associated with its user accounts. Amazon officials were not available for comment on the security changes, but during phone calls to Amazon customer service on Tuesday, representatives told us that the changes were sent out that morning and put in place for, quote, your security.
Good.
So there is the story. Yes, very, very good.
So what have we learned? In other words, I think the thing that people really want is to know, well, what should I be doing so that I can make this harder? I don't know if you can make it impossible, but what should I be doing to make it harder?
Clearly, the thing, how many times have we seen that convenience is the enemy of security? What was so convenient for Matt was that, first of all, that M. Honan was the same email, whether it had the suffix of Gmail or me.com, or there was another one. There were
You don't
three.
want readily guessable email addresses. So
You
that's
don't
number
want that.
one. Because
yes.
you could guess my email address on every service I use. Every one.
We all know your email address,
Yeah.
Leo.
But, I mean, so I failed at that. I mean, and it would be
in fact,
a bit of a pain to go change all that, to be honest. I
In
have to
fact,
create new accounts.
we made the comment last week when we were talking about Outlook.com that there was a land rush to log in and lock
Get your
down
name.
Your name on Outlook.com.
But truthfully, knowing my email address, because I'm never going to have knowing my email address shouldn't. I guess what I could do is create some dumb email addresses that are the ones I use just for accounts and account verification, right?
Yes, that's the big problem. So on one side, one aspect of convenience was that Matt happened to use M. Honan on, as an available account name across his services, such that it was obvious for the attackers to make the jump from his Gmail email address over to his Apple ID address just by guessing.
Right.
So there's that. But the main focus of convenience is that Gmail, everything pointed to Gmail. His Twitter account recovery was Gmail. His Apple ID recovery, his Amazon, billing address was Gmail. Everything went there, which was also where he conducted all of his other business. His website pointed there. So that single account makes a person's life very much easier. But unfortunately, that's the source. That's the major aspect of insecurity that over which we have control. We have no control over Amazon's policy.
Right.
And frankly, this was tricky enough that this gives me the creeps, because I know from the dialogue that you shared with me that you had with these people, we believe them to be, I guess, last night, they said they know how to do this kind of thing against other services.
Right. I asked him, I said, if you were going to hack me, how would you start? And he described this process. He said, well, the first thing we want to do is get as much information that's publicly online. We search for you. We want your docs, he called them.
Right.
And the problem is a lot of this stuff is online. And even down to home address, which is, if you've ever bought a house, is public information. It is out there.
Well, and
or contributed to a campaign or any number of things.
We're also seeing a trend. I mean, I'm seeing this in the news that the next generation of people growing up in this social networking environment they sort of take it for granted, and they're putting their lives online. There are people who are regretting it now, because I'm seeing, for example, that in employment interviews, they're asking for all of your social networking account names so they can go do research on you. They're not using a resume. They're going out and looking at your Facebook and who are your followers and, digging into your lives. So this, the people who are growing up in this environment to a greater degree than you and I, Leo. I mean, I just checked, do I have iCloud on anything or the wipe my device? And it's like, no, I just sort of
that is a very risky thing, and yet handy, especially for a laptop. I mean, to be able to wipe your portable device is great if it gets stolen. It's a form of security. The problem really is that Apple makes it a little too easy for somebody to hijack your account and then wipe your stuff.
Well, yes, and that's a problem that is an outgrowth of the real problem, which is to this day, the only means that the universal means for authenticating someone is demonstrating control of an email account.
Yeah.
That's the issue. It's what's your, are you the person who receives mail? Now, the really frightening thing, I mean, if we want to look at that, is that email is unencrypted. This is all going across the wire in plain text.
Right.
Web sessions increasingly, as we know, are protected by SSL, HTTPS, but email generally is not. And so, here are all these links for account recovery flying back and forth, and those are literally the keys to the kingdom. So the problem is that we to this day and age, I mean, even today, in this day and age, at this point, we don't, nobody has YubiKeys built in. We're not all carrying, Google Authenticator or VeriSign identity protection tokens or the something you have approach, which is why I loved that little tidbit we saw or we just heard about Apple sort of experimenting with, you need to tell us the serial number of your device. Because
that's a good one. Yeah.
Yes, that's good. That's not something. And
of course, if your device has been stolen.
Yes, and unfortunately, if once it becomes widespread, it'll be like your Social Security number. It'll, it'll be posted and available and in databases for people to check and so forth. So, unfortunately, we're just really bad at managing this kind of information. I'm annoyed, for example, when I get statements like privacy statements from my credit card companies, and they're saying, unless you send this back and tell us no, we're going to do the following things. And I look at what and it's like, share your personal information with our business partners, unspecified, just, anybody who we're thinking we want to do business with, unless you tell us we can't. Wait a minute. Why is this opt out rather than opt in? So that's a problem. But back to what we can do. We know there are beginning to be second factor authentication. One of the problems is, as these hackers who you had the conversation with and who Matt spoke with, they said all we need is information. When they made phone calls. This all the essence of these attacks, as you said, they had to be rather bold because this was not something done all online. This was people on the phone providing information. So there was nowhere here was as we have discussed in multi-factor authentication many times, something you have. This was all something you know. Mm-hmm. It was security questions. It was last 4 digits of your credit card number. I mean, all of this something you know, not something that you physically possess. So I would say the right thing to do, the best thing we could do, because we cannot control the policies of all the companies we do business with. I'm glad this happened. I'm glad Amazon got a wake-up call. I'm glad Apple got a wake-up call. But, they're two biggies, but they're not certainly the only people that may have hackable policies.
Well, and these guys claim they have many other companies with similar bad policies that they can take advantage of.
So you really want to bifurcate because email confirmation loops are the only way we have still for doing password recovery, is you want to consciously separate completely an email account for those sorts of purposes from the ones you normally use during the day. And it's going to be less convenient. It'd be much easier if they were all going to the same place, but you want to use a different account name. You want to use a domain name maybe that is different, but you also want an account where as to the best of your ability, it looks like they honor tight recovery. I know, for example, even PayPal, I'm set up with my football that I'm still using, the 6-digit time varying code and a VIP token on my phone, so I'm able to use it when I'm away from home. But right there, underneath the challenge for those is click here if you don't have it with you. What?
Right. Almost every time. Right. Because, again, convenience trumps security.
Yeah. The point is, I'm promising I'm going to have it with me.
Right.
I mean, and I went looking around. Is there any way I can say, take that exception off?
Right.
I want the security of having to have what I'm telling you I will have, and you're telling me I have to have, except you're telling me I don't have to have it.
Yeah. So you got to wonder, well,
yeah. So
and that's the problem, by the way, with security questions, because people don't remember them. Then they go, okay, well, you don't need it. All you need is the last 4 digits, or they did. All you need is
you forgot your question.
Just give us your email and last 4. We'll call it a day.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you specifically about two-factor authentication on Google. And Google has a particular problem. Now, Facebook has turned on or has available, and you should turn it on, two-factor authentication. And what it will do is we'll send a code. Actually, you have to use the Facebook app on your smartphone. It will give you a code which you can then enter if you're going to log in on an unrecognized machine. I think that's great. The problem with Google...
that probably means that they leave a persistent cookie on the machine.
They do.
And then from then on,
it's a
when
known
that
machine
is being used,
right.
Okay, that's cool.
And you can I presume you can revoke those cookies and so forth. I'm pretty sure there's somewhere you could say, I don't recognize any of these devices. Let's start over.
Right.
And now Google has second-factor authentication, but it's more tricky for Google because not only do you log into your Google account on the web and on Google applications, both of which understand second-factor authentication, there are a great many third-party applications that do not. So what Google is required to do if you turn on second-factor authentication is give you one-time use passwords, which are all, by the way, alphanumeric. Now, they're only one-time use, so that's probably okay. They're not strong passwords. And now, for instance, if I want to use – I have a calendar app that I use that uses Google Calendar. Instead of using my Google password to log into this, I have to use this one-time authentication code. And then it's a pain in the butt, but that expires in some cases every 30 days, in some cases in unknown ways. And you've got to go generate another one and use it again. And that seems to me, besides being a pain in the neck, and I keep trying to turn this thing on, and I always turn it off because I'm a little different than most people. I have many, many devices with many, and they're all logging into Google Email, Google Calendar, Google Voice. That means I have to enter these in all the time. I have dozens of one-time passwords. It seems to me if I have a strong password on Google and this I think is the most important thing people can do on Google, have attached a cell phone number for account recovery to it. That's not done by default.
And not link it to another address
and link it to a separate address that nobody knows, which I've done.
Yes.
That's going to be as good as this second, well, not theoretically as good, but practically as good as second-factor authentication. It's certainly a lot less
and more
of a pain.
practical for you to use. Because as we know, if it becomes a pain, it'll get turned off. Despite our best intentions and our desire to be secure, convenience will trump that ultimately.
Right. If everything supported second-factor authentication, I could use that Google Authenticator to generate that. Then I'd be happy. I don't mind entering my password and a code from my cell phone, but having to go back to the web, get a one-time use password, enter it in, and it has to be entered manually in many cases because I can't cut and paste because it's not on the same device.
Now, are these like startup problems where the two-factor authentication is not yet permeated
I would guess
Google's ecosystem?
Yeah, it's not Google. These are third-party apps. So a lot of apps, for instance, are designed to get Gmail, but they're not Google apps. or get your calendar, but they're not Google apps. So even desktop apps. So you can no longer, because you've turned on second-factor authentication, just use your Google password to open those apps up. So Google creates for you a one-time use password.
And do you want to use those, or do you have to use those?
You have to use those.
Okay.
And
I meant those apps.
Oh, well,
I mean,
if I'm using a smartphone, yeah. So if you're using an iPhone, for instance, it doesn't support the second-factor authentication. You have to use this one-time pass to get in there. And that one-time pass, again, I think it's 12 digits, it's 12 letters. It's alphanumeric, all uppercase. So it's not super secure. One-time use, I gather, but I'm not convinced. And I have seen that there are ways to bypass. So I've decided that I'm not. It's just too inconvenient. I'm not recommending this. People, you should all turn on second-factor authentication on Google. But for me, it's just too much trouble. And so, in fact, what I'm doing is I've got an account recovery phone number. I think that that's a good way. If he had that, he could have recovered his Gmail account, changed the password, and they would have been locked out again. Now, in the interim, they would have gotten into everything else. But
yeah, it was their access to Gmail that allowed them to get to Twitter, and that was really where they wanted to get.
Right.
So it was because Twitter was pointing to Gmail, as was Apple, as was Amazon. Everything was converging there on Google Mail because Matt is Google-centric, as you know, a huge number
most of us
people
are. Many of us are. Yeah. So diversity, heterogeneity is a very good idea.
Yeah, and being conscious of the fact that, unfortunately, at where we are today, email password recovery is the only universally available solution.
Right.
So it's what everybody offers. And unfortunately, it's not something you can turn off. It would be nice if there was a way to say, I will take responsibility for this. You know, it's the perfect example is I've talked about how I can't buy gas with a particular credit card because they just shut it down when they see it at a gas pump. And I've said, can I please override this? And they go, no, sorry, you can't.
Yeah.
So, you know, there are no options typically for disabling account recovery. Maybe, well, no, you can't not have an email address. So
I truly what I actually believe is that we're all vulnerable to some degree, and that you should do the best you can, but we're somewhat at the mercy of these third parties. What was creepy,
and I've talked about how porous security is, that I mean it's more porous than we think. What's creepy is that it was a whim. These one or more people just decided, ooh, look, at Matt. It'd be fun to post to that Twitter account. Let's go do that. And they were able to. You know, I mean, there was a huge collateral damage, as Matt described it, as a consequence of they're simply wanting to send tweets out through his Twitter account. So you got to wonder, you know, how safe we are to somebody wanting to get us.
I'm not clear, by the way, these single-time passwords. I have to ask Matt Cutts. There's unclarity in my mind about how they do not expire, but I am told that once you use one, you can't reuse it.
That would make sense. One time.
I would think that's how it is. They're called application-specific passwords, and you can revoke them at any time. But you have to go to the website, log into Google using two-factor authentication, and revoke them.
It would be nice if. Again, you know, lots of things would be nice. I mean, what Facebook is doing does raise the bar. The fact that they provide a secure cookie, I'm sure it's flagged secure, meaning that it will not be divulged over a non-SSL connection. So you have HTTPS secure connection to Facebook, which we know they have. I mean, you know, we've seen these changes and we've discussed them as they've been occurring over the last couple of years. So there's a cookie that only that machine has. They will only send in a query over a secure connection from your browser, which identifies it to Facebook as one that has been seen before. So that's a nice barrier. I mean, that is allowing Facebook to painlessly tag devices that you have in the past logged in from and allow you to do so again. That would be some nice tech for Google to add. One wonders why they don't yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in a world where we have to balance convenience with security, and so inevitably there are going to be flaws.
Yep. What I guess the main takeaway, the only real takeaway I can suggest from this fun, sad but really gripping adventure with Matt is consider separating your accounts that could be used for password recovery so that and really it's not clear that you want a single account. You kind of want a family of accounts, and that really becomes a pain. If your main services all need to point somewhere different, boy. The problem is using email for this is just really that's the source of major insecurity, and I don't see that going away anytime soon because there's nothing to replace it, and until we get good something you have. Additional factor authentication.
I use it on BattleNet. I use it wherever it works. So Blizzard has one, and they have an authenticator that you have to download another app on your phone, and it gives you the one-time key, and you'd use the password in that.
Mine is never far from me.
I got my fob for PayPal, although, as you point out, PayPal's got that little thing saying, did you lose your fob? Well, let's help you get in. So how good can this really be?
Yeah.
And by the way, using LastPass would not have saved Matt in the least. It wasn't an issue of somebody stealing his passwords.
Nope.
And that's the key to this, is that there are holes, it turns out, in all sorts of places. And it just takes somebody who's willing to kind of mess around.
And that's work the system.
And work the system. And that's what these kids are good at. They got a lot of time. They're smart. And they're motivated, apparently.
And there's a culture.
There's a culture. They pass this stuff around. Exactly. So I asked this guy, how did you get started? Where'd you learn this stuff? How did you get all these techniques? He said it started when I was 16, and I wanted a cool gamer tag on Xbox 360. And I asked my friends, and see, this is what happens. They started passing around techniques for hacking. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure, I doubt very much that these guys came up with their own techniques. Maybe they did, but I think in most cases they're just it's like a recipe book.
There is
Step 1,
an underground.
Call Amazon.
Yep.
There's an underground.
Yep. And they're chatting on if they're in high school, I guess they're around that age. They're sitting around at lunch. Passing back and forth, new ways someone has found for running a scam. It's like, hey, I tried this and this worked, and the person who comes up with it, might be too timid to do it, but he tells somebody who's brazen enough to go give it a shot, to get on the phone and call Amazon and Apple.
There's no harm to doing that. The worst, they could say, well, if you get suspicious, you hang up.
You got to wonder too how anonymous those calls were. Those it's not as easy to obscure your phone number as it is your internet connection.
Yeah, it is.
So,
yeah, it is.
Okay.
But let's not go into that.
Okay.
Steve, this is such a good subject. It's a fascinating topic, and I'm really glad you addressed it. I guess we'll do questions next week.
Yes, we will. We spend so much time talking about technology because that's where all this comes from.
Right.
But this was a perfect example of how technology can't save us if the policies are in place and the systems are in place that allow this kind of scheme. This had nothing to do with how long the passwords were, as you said, or how many bits of crypto were in use. These guys cut right through all that and sent tweets out of Matt's Twitter account. So, wow.
Thank you, Steve Gibson. He's the man. Next week, your questions, right? We're going to do Q&A?
Yep. Yes.
So go to grc.com/feedback to ask those questions. While you're there, check out Spinrite, the world's finest hard drive maintenance and recovery utility. You might pick up a couple of freebies. Steve's got a lot of them, including perfect paper passwords. You could just print out some passwords. It's perfect. They're paper. The password haystacks, which I use now all the time. See, this is the irony. I know I have very secure passwords. I'm not worried about my passwords anymore. Apparently, that doesn't matter. All this stuff is available at grc.com. We do this show every Wednesday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 1800 UTC on twit.tv. Watch live. We love it if you do. I love to see the chat, the feedback, and I certainly would pay attention to it. But you can also catch it after the fact. We make on-demand versions available. Now, Steve does some unusual on-demand versions. He does a 16-kilobit version for the bandwidth paired. That's at grc.com. He's also got transcripts, which is the ultimate in compact. ASCII text, baby. All of that, grc.com. But for the video, the higher quality audio, we've got that at twit.tv/SN. Steve's on the Twitter.
Leo,
yeah.
I forgot to mention that I made an improvement to the little animation that you saw last week for the first time.
Steve was playing with his HTML5 and his JavaScript.
If you do grc.com/animation.htm, I added peak detection to the output of the read amplifier. So it came out pretty cool.
You're having fun with this, aren't you?
Yeah, I am.
This is all programmatically generated. None of it is graphics, right? You're just drawing lines and boxes and squares and.
Yeah, and it's like I think it's less than it's around 30K. And when those waveforms get into the right amplifier there, then it starts switching its polarity, which changes the direction of magnetism on the disk platter. Then the platter rotates over in my little schematic. Then the read head picks up on it, and now here's and we detected the pulse, the peak of the waveform.
Peak detector. Peak detector. You are a crack up. Oh, what fun. And by the way, you can view source on this. He has not obfuscated the code. I'm learning JavaScript inspired by you, and I'm looking at the code because it's very cool. Very, very
fun
cool.
Stuff.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve Gibson.
Okay, my friend.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Steve's on the Twitter, at SGGRC. He doesn't follow people, but you can @message him, and he reads those.
Yep, I do.
And he responds, too.
I do.
Thanks, Steve. We'll talk again next week on Security Now. Security Now. Yeah, I'm a little disappointed with the second-factor authentication on Google. Those passwords apparently never expire. And can be used over and over and over again on any app you want.
Wow! So it's up for you to revoke them.
Yeah, or to forget. It says you could forget this password. You'll never need it again. That's because there's more where that came from, and all of which work on anything, anytime. So it's basically generating new insecure passwords all the time.
Is there a database where you can say this? I gave this password here.
It's up to you to maintain it. You have to say, okay, I gave this one to this app. But so you can revoke it. But to me, it's not in any way enhancing my security. And I understand why. Google, you can't force people to support second-factor authentication, so they have to do this.
Yeah. Wow.
So I'm just not going to use it. I got I just don't see any reason to. I am using second factor where it works, where it's only in one place. And I guess if you didn't have a lot of googly stuff on your phone or whatever, but I have 2 or 3 Android devices. I have 2 or 3 iOS devices. Not only do those need the Google stuff doesn't, but if I'm using an app on the Google phones, that does, because they don't understand it. And every iOS does. Many of my desktop apps do. So I'm all the time. So I've generated dozens of them. Matt Cutts was tweeting me and said, "No, they're good. They're good."
Yeah. Well, I mean, they may be all he could do, And then if you forget which one you gave to which app, then you're really messed up.
No, you don't have to enter it again. Because you can use another one the next time.
Oh, okay.
There's an infinite number now of these new
revocable
application-specific passwords. So you don't have to remember them because you just generate more. Which doesn't, it seems to me better to have a good, strong password that you use.
Yeah, although if the app would need to know the password, and if the app were compromised,
right,
then
wait a minute, Steve. The password that I gave that app, that can be reused by the bad guy.
Yeah.
It doesn't change anything. The app is still getting a password that does not expire, is not revoked.
Yeah.
I would have to revoke it. So this is what I thought. It was a one-time use password. I thought, oh, you use it on that app, Google sees it and says, okay, you can never use that one again. That would work, right? But I'm being told again and again that it's not revocable, that you have to revoke it.
Yeah, it would be a huge pain because you'd be consuming these big passwords constantly, and no one would use it. So I guess I can see I can see the logic behind them having made them static and revocable. And the only real benefit to them being granular is that you can't, if you mistrust an app that you gave one to, you haven't given it your grand master password. You've given it its own personal password or private, its own unique password. And then you could say, I don't trust you anymore.
But that's assuming you know that it's untrustworthy.
Yeah, we're not there.
So there's hacker calendar. I give it the one-time password. Now, if Google said, okay, that's it, you used it, you can't use it again, everybody be happy. But no, hacker has password that works on all Google stuff. Now, there are limitations, apparently. That password can't be used to change settings. So apparently that password is not as capable.
Oh, that's okay.
So I think that's the theory is, well, yeah, he's got a password, but all he can do is read it's a read-only password. But still, I don't like it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have a strong password, and if I feel something's been compromised, I'll change it, or I'll change it monthly. Isn't that better?
Yeah. There is work underway, and there was mention of it, in fact, on TWiT Sunday. I think maybe Ed referred to it, and I've been keeping an eye on it. I'm a member of the group tracking this, and this is the I can't think of the acronym. It's got a bad acronym. NISTIC or something, and the National
Institute of Standards and Time.
No. Yeah, they're doing it, but it's the Trusted Identities in Cyberspace Initiative. So it ends in TIC because that's Trusted Identities in Cyberspace. But it's it's working towards the solution for this. And I mean, frankly, it is by having a big standard that there is some hope for this kind of thing. So that'll probably be where it comes from. So we'll be talking about that as it happens. It's going to be a massive committee. It's going to take forever. So we can't wait for them.
Steve, thank you.
My pleasure.
Take care.
Talk to you next week, my friend.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.